Hello, these are Flip Notes 5.1, which is on mental and physical health. And our first section specifically is an introduction to health psychology, which will lead into psychological disorders and treatment. Let's get started. So what is health psychology? Well, it's the field that explores biological, psychological, and all the social factors that influence health and illness. So basically, it's mental health, which has become such a big topic lately. But it really incorporates lots of factors other than just psychology, but physical medicine, public health, and sociology, which studies group behavior and how all of those can improve health outcomes. Different elements to it. Physical health looks at things like diet and physical activity, but also substance use and also how doctors and medical professionals can impact health. Wellness has to do more with a person's individual beliefs and attitudes and perceptions, and how they make decisions whether or not they're going to seek healthcare or even follow that healthcare and try to prevent things on their own. And then positive psychology links in the positive thinking that can help people to cope with stress faster. So what is stress? We know what it feels like, but it's when our body is facing a physiological and psychological response to challenges that are beyond what we are normally able to cope with. So our body activates a stress response, and that can include releasing hormones that we've talked about before, like adrenaline and cortisol, and help you to fight those threats, whether they are real or perceived. Those chemicals and their presence in the body can lead to other conditions like hypertension, which is the formal name for high blood pressure. And when high blood pressure can trigger headaches, among other things. And over time, being in that stressed state and having those elevated levels of cortisol can lead to immune suppression, which means that your immune system breaks down over time and you become more vulnerable to illness. So what are different types of stressors? Not all stress is bad. Sometimes having good things that are keeping you busy can count as a stressor. So eustress are things that are positive stress, and they can actually improve your performance, enhance your well-being. This is like positive challenges, like planning how you're going to spend your time on a vacation, looking forward to planning your schedule for the next 4 years. So it's, a challenge, but it's giving you something to look forward to. Whereas distress are the negative type of stressors, the ones that can lead to anxiety, can make you feel frustrated, especially if they seem threatening or harmful and out of your control. And the more extreme stressors, a traumatic experience, and then the smaller end are daily hassles, little frustrations, but can add up to major stressors over time. Another thing that can contribute to our overall health and mental health experience are adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And these can include abuse, neglect, and other household challenges like domestic violence or just a high expressed emotion level within the home. Having exposure to those ACEs constantly can lead to other unhealthy behaviors, including a lack of physical activity, causing you to miss lots of school or missing work. People often use that stress or face that stress with smoking and alcoholism and drug use. All of those can affect physical and mental health, can affect obesity, heart disease, depression, some other things in there, diabetes that followed up from that poor eating habits. So what does our body do? Walter Cannon describes the fight or flight response, which we've talked about throughout the year multiple times. But we know that when our body goes into fight or flight, that there's a flood of chemicals in the brain or from the brain. One of those is epinephrine and another is norepinephrine, and they're released from the adrenal gland, and they're going to get our heart rate up, get our breathing to increase, mobilize sugar to give our body energy, and then helping to dull or block pain. The hypothalamus, we know, is the boss of the endocrine system, and it's going to tell the pituitary gland that it's time to respond to stress. At the slow level, it can trigger the release of cortisol, but at the fast level, it's releasing those fight or flight hormones. The general adaptation syndrome was developed by Hans Selye, and he describes how we face stress in 3 steps. So my acronym for this is you are stressed and you are running out of gas. And gas is general adaptation syndrome, and then the 3 stages are alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. So during the alarm stage, this is when your body and your mind are first confronted with whatever the stressor is, and you go into that fight or flight response triggered by your hypothalamus. Your body is releasing neurotransmitters and hormones, all the chemicals to help you deal. If this continues over a long time, though, that becomes harder on your body, can cause high blood pressure, weaken your immune system. But initially, that alarm reaction is a good thing, and that's why we have a low level, or it drops here below the stress resistance. Resistance is when your body is actually actively trying to fight the stress. So outwardly, the body appears to be gaining an advantage, resisting the stressor, but inwardly, you're trying to restore homeostasis. The resistance only applies to the original stressor. If something else happens along the way, then that's separate, and that causes you to feel even more depleted of your resources. Then over time, if you're fighting in that resistance stage for too long, then you end up at the exhaustion stage. That's where you no longer feel like you can overcome whatever it is that is stressing you. The autonomic nervous system tries to overcompensate, but the body has already used so much energy that if the stressor is not removed, you'll feel exhaustion and possibly even eventually death. So usually there's warning signs of exhaustion, but things like heart attacks, clogged arteries, frequent and excessive colds and flu and headaches, those are all signs that your body can be exhausted and that you need to take action to cope and slow down. Another contrasting theory, and this one is newer, in contrast to the fight or flight response, is the tend and befriend theory. And it says that we tend to, instead of just being ready to fight or flight, that we tend to each other's needs. And this is more common in women, that we're biologically predisposed to seek social connections, befriending each other, and that we nurture each other. So when bad things happen, some people have that desire to be involved and collaborate with others to provide emotional support. Tend and befriend theory. Other ways to alleviate stress is to actually look at what's causing the stress. So problem-focused coping says that you'll be able to cope with your stress when you actually deal with the problem. If your stress is that your car keeps breaking down and you don't know if you're going to have a reliable source of transportation, then you're going to work on solving the problem of trying to get your car fixed or replaced. Emotion-focused coping says we can't necessarily change the situation, but we can change how we feel about it. You break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, that causes you stress, so you seek support. So it's more about, I just want to vent. I want to get my frustration and anger out, but I don't necessarily need a solution to my problem. I just want to deal with the emotional side of it. The other half of this section has to do with positive psychology. And positive psychology overall aims to focus on well-being, resilience, looks at positive emotions, and how those can contribute to our overall psychological health. A big aspect of positive psychology is the importance of recognizing and experiencing and describing gratitude. So studies have shown that expressing gratitude can lead to an increased subjective well-being. So subjective well-being meaning how you perceive your levels of stress and your overall well-being. There are 6 signature strengths that contribute to an overall positive well-being. And the first is courage. So bravery, honesty, perseverance. But these are all emotional strengths that will help us to accomplish goals and face opposition. Humanity, so showing kindness for others, having good social intelligence where you're recognizing where others are feeling, experiencing, and showing love. But these are interpersonal strengths that involve tending and befriending others. Justice, so recognizing and participating in fairness and leadership and teamwork. Your signature strength can relate to civics and being part of a healthy community life. Temperance refers to forgiveness and having humility and self-regulation and prudence, but trying to protect against excess, that not being overwhelmed with things that you don't need. Transcendence, which usually means to like rise above. So an appreciation of beauty in the world and having hope, experiencing humor, but also having gratitude and spirituality. All of those in connection to the idea that there's more beyond yourself, to the larger universe, and kind of looking for a meaning for things in life. Wisdom involves creativity, curiosity, judgment, having perspective and a love of learning, but having those cognitive strengths involved in acquiring and using knowledge. And then our last part here is post-traumatic growth. So what happens when a person does experience trauma? That trauma is not ever going to go away, but positive psychology says that you can instead channel it and use it in a different way, finding a new meaning for what has happened, making it a personal strength, finding an appreciation for life following the bad thing that happened. So for example, a cancer survivor now who experienced the trauma can now experience post-traumatic growth by developing this new rejuvenated sense of life, trying to advocate to others, deepening their relationships with their loved ones, realizing what they would have lost, and then really showing how adversity can instead lead to growth and a positive outlook on life. So changing that overall perception. All right, that's it for section 5.1.